It doesn't start with a fall. It doesn't start with a diagnosis. It doesn't even start with pain. It starts with a hesitation, a split second, barely noticeable, right before you push yourself up from a chair. That tiny pause where your body quietly asks, "Are you sure about this?" Or maybe it's the moment your hand reaches for the stair railing, not because you decided to grab it. Your hand just went there, on its own, like it already knew something you weren't ready to admit. And you tell yourself, "I'm just being careful. That's smart. That's wisdom." But deep down, something shifts. Because careful used to feel like a choice. Now it feels like a requirement. That's not wisdom. That's your legs sending you a signal. And most people never hear it, not really, until it's already gone much further than they realize. Here's what makes this so dangerous. It's quiet. There's no alarm, no warning label, no doctor pulling you aside to say, "This is the moment things started changing." It just accumulates, slowly, silently, every single day. And by the time the weakness becomes undeniable, by the time standing up becomes a project and stairs become something you plan around, the process has already been running for years. Years. Most people accept it as the price of getting older. They adjust, they modify. They start sitting closer to tables, avoiding certain shoes, skipping trips they used to love. They shrink their world to fit what their legs will allow. And they call it aging gracefully. But I want to show you something that changes that entire story. Because in all my years working with older patients, people in their 70s, their 80s, even well into their 90s, I kept seeing something that refused to fit the standard explanation. Some of them weren't declining, not because they were unusually lucky, not because they had perfect genetics or some expensive treatment plan. They were different in one specific way. And it had nothing to do with how much they exercised. It had everything to do with what they were, or weren't, giving their body at a very specific time each day. One small habit, repeated consistently, and their legs responded in ways that genuinely surprised me. I'm Dr. James Cross, and what I'm going to walk you through today is the real reason leg strength disappears as we age, and the surprisingly simple daily strategy that can interrupt that process. Even if you're already past 70, even if you've already started to feel that hesitation, even if part of you has already accepted weakness as permanent, stay with me through this entire video, because the piece I'll reveal toward the end, the part most people never hear, may be the single most important thing your legs have been waiting for. If you're serious about taking better care of your health, make sure you subscribe. I share simple, practical advice designed especially for seniors. And feel free to leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I always read them and appreciate every one of you. Let's get back to it. So let's talk about what's actually going on. Because most people have the wrong picture entirely. When they feel their legs getting weaker, they assume the explanation is simple. Old age, wear and tear, parts breaking down, like a car with too many miles on it. And that mental picture, as understandable as it is exactly what keeps people from doing anything about it. Because if your legs are just wearing out, then there's nothing to do but accept it. But that's not what's happening, not even close. Here's the truth. Your muscles are not static. They are not slowly crumbling like an old building left in the rain. They are alive, constantly moving between two states, breaking down and rebuilding. Even right now, sitting where you are, your muscle tissue is going through that cycle. Old fibers are being dismantled. New ones are being laid down in their place. Your body has been doing this your entire life. The problem isn't that the process stops. The problem is that the balance shifts. When you're young, rebuilding wins. Your body tears down a little, builds back more. Muscles stay strong. Recovery is fast. Everything feels reliable. But somewhere around your 50s, and accelerating through your 60s and 70s, that balance quietly tips the other direction. Breakdown begins to outpace repair. Not dramatically, not all at once, just slightly more loss than gain, day after day. And here's the part that should make you stop and think. That imbalance isn't being driven by your age. It's being driven by signals, or more accurately, by the absence of signals. Your muscles rely on specific chemical triggers to know when to rebuild. Hormonal signals, nutritional signals, signals that say, repair now, reinforce here, We need this tissue strong. As you get older, your body becomes less sensitive to those signals. It's not that the signals disappear entirely, it's that they get quieter. Like trying to have a conversation in a room that keeps getting louder. The message is still being sent, but the muscles aren't hearing it the way they used to. And so, the rebuilding slows, and the breakdown quietly continues. Meanwhile, something else is happening underneath all of this. Low-grade inflammation, the kind you can't feel, the kind that produces no obvious symptoms, begins to interfere with muscle repair at a cellular level. This is sometimes called silent inflammation, and it is relentless. It doesn't flare up dramatically, it just hums along in the background, week after week, year after year, gradually making it harder for your muscles to do what they're designed to do. By the time your legs feel unreliable, by the time that hesitation before standing becomes your new normal, this process has been running for a long time. But here's what matters. It is not irreversible. And the reason it can be interrupted has everything to do with those signals, which means the real question isn't can your legs rebuild? The real question is, are you giving them what they need to hear the signal? That's exactly what we're going to get into. So now you understand the signals. Your muscles are listening for them, waiting for them. And when those signals go quiet, breakdown wins, strength fades, and your legs start to feel like they belong to someone older than you. Which brings us to the question most people ask next. So I just need to exercise more, right? It seems logical. It feels like the obvious answer. Move the legs, challenge the muscles, force them to rebuild. And look, movement matters. I'm not going to stand here and tell you exercise is worthless. It isn't. But I need you to understand something that most people, including a lot of doctors, never clearly explain. Exercise is a request. It's your body raising its hand and saying, these muscles need to be stronger. But a request is only as powerful as the response it receives. And if your body doesn't have the raw materials to answer that request, the request goes unanswered. Think about it this way. Imagine a construction crew showing up every morning, ready to work, motivated, skilled, on time. But the supply truck never arrives. No concrete, no steel, no materials of any kind. So the crew stands there, day after day, working hard at nothing. That is exactly what happens inside your legs when you exercise without the right nutritional foundation in place. The signal to rebuild goes out. The muscle tissue is ready and waiting, but the building blocks aren't there. And so, despite your effort, despite your consistency, despite doing what you were told, your legs stay weak, or worse, they get weaker. And this is the part that breaks people. Because they tried. They walked every morning. They did their exercises. They pushed through the discomfort, and their legs still let them down. So they conclude the worst possible thing. My body is too far gone. Nothing works for me anymore. But that's not the truth. The truth is, they were solving the wrong problem. They were focused entirely on the signal, the exercise, while the response system was quietly starving. Here's something I've observed consistently across patients. The older adults who maintain genuine leg strength, the ones who move confidently, who don't plan their lives around their limitations, they aren't necessarily the ones exercising hardest. They're the ones whose bodies can actually respond to the work they're doing. And the difference almost always comes down to nutrition. Not a complicated protocol, not an elaborate supplement stack, just the right nutrients delivered to the body in the right way at the right time. That last part, the right time, is where most people are losing the battle without even knowing it. Because you can eat reasonably well, you can check most of the boxes, and still be leaving your muscles completely exposed during the window that matters most. A window that opens every single night, while you sleep, while you rest, while you assume your body is simply recovering. The truth is, for millions of people over 60, that nighttime window isn't a recovery period at all. It's the period when the most damage quietly accumulates, night after night, undetected, undisturbed, and completely preventable once you understand what's actually happening inside your body after your last meal of the day. That's exactly where we're going next, and I promise you, once you see it clearly, you will never think about your evenings the same way again. Every night, without realizing it, you go to war with your own legs, not intentionally, not dramatically, just quietly, through something as ordinary and unavoidable as going to sleep. Here's exactly what happens. You finish your last meal of the day. Maybe it's dinner, maybe a small snack afterward, and then the kitchen closes. Your body keeps running, heart beating, lungs breathing, cells doing what cells do, but the incoming fuel? Gone. And for a younger body, that gap is manageable. A younger metabolism holds its own through the night. It pulls from available energy stores without touching much muscle tissue. It coasts through those hours and wakes up relatively intact. But for a body over 60, that same overnight gap becomes something far more costly. Because here's what your body does when it runs low on available fuel during those long nighttime hours. It turns inward. And one of the first places it looks? Your muscle tissue. This process has a name, muscle protein breakdown, and it happens to everyone, every night to some degree. But in older adults, the rate of that breakdown accelerates significantly during fasting periods. Your body essentially begins dismantling its own muscle fibers to harvest the amino acids stored inside them. Not because it wants to weaken you, because it's doing what it was designed to do. Keep you alive through the night using whatever resources are available. The problem is, the resources it's raiding are the exact ones your legs depend on. And this happens every single night. Think about the math for a moment. If your last meal is at 7 in the evening and you wake up at 6 the next morning, that's 11 hours. 11 hours of your body running without nutritional support. 11 hours of muscle breakdown quietly outpacing repair. Multiply that by 7 nights a week, 52 weeks a year, year after year. And suddenly the weakness that seemed to just happen doesn't seem so mysterious anymore. It was building in the dark, every night, while you slept. Now here's what makes this particularly frustrating. Most people do everything right during the day. They eat reasonably, they move around, they take their vitamins, and then they hand 11 hours of every single night to the very process that's stealing their strength. Unknowingly, completely unknowingly, and no one tells them. Not their physician during a routine checkup, not the fitness advice they read online, not the general nutrition guidance they've been following for years. The nighttime window stays invisible. Until now. Because once you understand that this is where the real damage happens, the answer becomes surprisingly clear. You don't need to overhaul your entire life. You don't need an aggressive new fitness routine. You simply need to address what's happening during those hours, with one specific daily habit, timed deliberately and repeated consistently. That habit, and exactly why it works, is what's coming next. So now you see it. The real enemy isn't your age. It isn't your genetics. It isn't even the weakness itself. It's the window. That long, unguarded stretch of hours every night where your muscles are breaking down faster than they can rebuild, and your body has nothing coming in to stop it. And once you see that window clearly, something shifts, because the solution stops feeling complicated. It stops feeling overwhelming. It becomes almost obvious. If the damage is happening during a specific window, then the answer is to protect that window. Not with medication, not with an aggressive new protocol, with something far simpler than that: timing. Now, I know that word gets thrown around a lot in nutrition conversations. Eat at the right time. Don't eat too late. Have breakfast within an hour of waking. Most of it is noise, but what I'm talking about is different. What I'm talking about is something with real, documented physiological reasoning behind it. Here's the core idea. Your muscles don't just need nutrients. They need nutrients when they're most vulnerable. And for adults over 60, the most vulnerable moment, the moment when muscle tissue is most at risk of breaking down without anything to stop it, is during those overnight hours. Which means the most powerful thing you can do for your leg strength has very little to do with what you eat at breakfast, or lunch, or even dinner. It has everything to do with what you give your body in that final window before sleep. Think of it like this. Imagine you're about to leave your house for 11 hours. Before you go, you have two choices. You can walk out the door and leave everything exposed, or you can take 5 minutes to secure what matters before you leave. That 5 minutes doesn't require heroic effort. It just requires intention. That's what this habit is. 5 minutes of intention. One small, deliberate choice made consistently each night. That tells your body, not tonight. Tonight, we rebuild. Now, here's where it gets specific. The key is not just eating something before bed. Eating anything before bed is not the answer, and in some cases, the wrong choice can actually work against you. The key is delivering a very particular type of nutritional signal to your muscles at that specific time. A signal that does two things simultaneously. First, it slows the rate of overnight muscle breakdown by giving your body an alternative fuel source so it stops raiding your muscle tissue. Second, it provides the raw materials your muscles need to actually repair during those overnight hours, instead of just surviving them. Your body does its deepest repair work while you sleep. That is not a metaphor. Growth hormone peaks during deep sleep. Cellular repair accelerates. Tissue regeneration is at its highest point of the entire day. But all of that biological machinery, all of that remarkable overnight rebuilding capacity, requires materials to work with. Without them, the machinery runs, but it runs on your own muscle tissue. With them, it runs on what you gave it. And the difference between those two scenarios, played out night after night, week after week, is the difference between legs that slowly betray you and legs that quietly grow stronger while you rest. Now the question becomes, what exactly is that nutritional signal? What specific food delivers it most effectively? And why does it work in a way that most daytime eating simply cannot replicate? The answer is closer than you think, and it's been sitting in grocery stores this entire time, overlooked, underestimated, and almost never discussed in the context of leg strength. That's exactly what's coming next. Before I tell you exactly what that food is, I want to tell you about some of the people who found it first. Not through research papers, not through a prescription, through one quiet, consistent habit, repeated night after night, until their legs started answering back. The first person I want you to meet is Samuel, 78 years old, retired electrician, proud, independent man who had spent his entire life using his hands and his body to build things. When he first came to see me, he had stopped walking unless he absolutely had to. Not because of pain exactly, because of uncertainty. His legs felt unreliable, unpredictable, like the ground beneath him was slightly less trustworthy than it used to be. He told me something I've never forgotten. "Doctor, I feel like my legs don't belong to me anymore." He wasn't eating badly. He wasn't sedentary by choice. He was doing what most people do, living reasonably, trying to stay active, wondering why it wasn't enough. What he wasn't doing was protecting that overnight window. His meals were spaced too far apart. His last meal of the day was early, and by the time he woke up each morning, his body had spent 10, sometimes 11 hours quietly dismantling the very muscle tissue his legs depended on. We made one change, just one, and within 2 months, Samuel told me something that stopped me mid-sentence. I walked to the gate and back without thinking about my legs, without thinking about them. That's the moment you know something real has shifted, not when the weakness disappears entirely, but when your legs stop being the thing your mind tracks every single step. Then there's Margaret, 83 years old, former school teacher, a woman who had quietly given up her garden because the kneeling and standing had become too unpredictable to risk. She didn't tell her family how much she missed it. She just stopped going outside as much, and slowly, without anyone noticing, including herself, her world got smaller. 4 months after making this one nightly change, her daughter called me, not to report a problem, to tell me her mother had been outside in her garden 3 mornings in a row and hadn't mentioned her legs once. Then there's a retired postal worker named Arthur, 71, a man who had started gripping his wife's arm on stairs, something that quietly embarrassed him every single time. 6 weeks in, he stopped reaching for her arm, not because someone told him to, because he didn't need to anymore. 3 different people, 3 different lives, one consistent pattern. Nothing dramatic changed in their routines. No gym memberships, no complicated meal plans, no expensive interventions. Just one deliberate habit, introduced at the right time, repeated consistently, and their legs began responding in ways they had stopped believing were still possible. Which brings us to the habit itself, what it is, why it works, and why tonight is the right time to start. Samuel walked to his gate without thinking about his legs. Margaret was back in her garden. Arthur stopped reaching for his wife's arm on the stairs. One habit, one consistent, deliberate, nightly habit. So what is it? Here it is, plainly, without drama. The single most powerful thing an adult over 60 can do for their leg strength is eat a slow-digesting protein before bed. That's it. Not a pill. Not a powder with 17 unpronounceable ingredients. Not something that requires a prescription or a specialist or a complete lifestyle overhaul. A slow-digesting protein, eaten deliberately, every night, before sleep. Now let me explain exactly why this works, because the mechanism is what makes this so compelling. Remember what we established about the overnight window. Your body spends those long nighttime hours in a fasting state. Fuel runs low, and without an alternative source to draw from, it turns to your muscle tissue, breaking it down, harvesting the amino acids stored inside, and quietly accelerating the very weakness you're trying to fight. A slow-digesting protein interrupts that process directly. Here's how. Unlike fast-digesting proteins, which flood your bloodstream quickly and are processed within an hour or two, a slow-digesting protein releases amino acids gradually, steadily, over the course of 4, 5, sometimes 6 hours, which means while you sleep, while your body is doing its deepest repair work, it has a continuous supply of raw materials arriving at exactly the right time. It's the difference between handing your muscles a single cup of water and leaving, and installing a slow drip that runs through the night. One keeps them surviving, the other keeps them rebuilding. And for adults over 60, whose muscle tissue is already less responsive to nutritional signals during the day, that overnight delivery window becomes arguably the most important nutritional event of the entire 24 hours. Now here's the part that surprises most people. The best source of slow-digesting protein for this purpose isn't exotic. It isn't expensive. It's casein, the naturally occurring protein found most abundantly in one of the most ordinary foods on the planet, cottage cheese. Plain, simple, completely unassuming cottage cheese, eaten before bed, consistently, without complication. That is what Samuel ate. That is what changed Margaret's mornings. That is what gave Arthur back his confidence on the stairs. A single small serving of cottage cheese before sleep, delivering a slow, sustained release of amino acids directly into the overnight window where muscle breakdown had been winning for years. Your body finally has something to work with. The repair machinery that runs during deep sleep finally has materials to use. And night after night, quietly and without fanfare, the balance begins to shift. Breakdown slows, rebuilding accelerates, and legs that once felt unreliable begin, gradually, genuinely, to feel like yours again. The only thing left now is to actually start, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. So now you know, not a theory, not a guess, not another piece of generic advice that sounds reasonable but leads nowhere. A specific mechanism, a specific window, a specific habit that addresses both, directly, nightly, consistently. And the beautiful thing about what you've just learned is this. You don't have to change everything. You don't have to overhaul your diet, join a gym, or reorganize your entire daily routine around your legs. You just have to protect the window, starting tonight. Here's exactly what that looks like. Roughly 30 minutes before you go to bed, not hours before, not casually sometime in the evening, sit down with a small serving of cottage cheese, half a cup. Maybe a full cup if you're comfortable with it. Plain is fine. A little fruit on the side is fine. Keep it simple. The goal isn't an elaborate bedtime ritual. The goal is delivery. Getting that slow-digesting casein protein into your system before the overnight fast begins, so your muscles have a steady supply of amino acids running through the hours when breakdown would otherwise be winning unopposed. That's the foundation. Now build around it. During the day, don't let your meals drift too far apart. Long gaps between daytime meals create the same problem on a smaller scale. Your body runs low, turns inward, and borrows from muscle tissue to keep going. Eat at reasonable intervals. Include protein at every meal. Not obsessively, just intentionally. And don't fear the foods that support this process. Eggs, fish, legumes, leafy greens, whole grains. These aren't complicated prescriptions. They're the ordinary, accessible foods that give your body the raw materials it needs to keep the rebuilding signal strong throughout the day. So that by the time you reach that bedtime serving of cottage cheese, your muscles aren't starting from zero. They're continuing a conversation your body has been having all day. Now set your expectations correctly. This is not a 7-day fix. Your legs didn't weaken in a week. They won't rebuild in one either. What you will notice, if you're consistent, is something subtle first. Less stiffness in the morning. A little more ease when you stand. A quiet steadiness that wasn't there before. And then one day, like Samuel, like Margaret, like Arthur, you'll catch yourself moving through your morning without once thinking about your legs. That moment is closer than you believe. But only if you start. Tonight. Not next week. Not after you've thought about it a little longer. Tonight. Because every night you wait is another night that window stays unprotected. Another night the breakdown runs unopposed. Another morning your legs wake up a little more depleted than they needed to be. You've spent years not knowing this. Now you do. And knowledge without action is just a missed opportunity. Your legs are still capable. Your body is still listening. The only question that remains is the same one it's always been. Are you finally ready to give it what it needs? Thanks for watching all the way through. Staying informed is key to living a healthier, longer life. If you want more simple, practical health advice, make sure you subscribe and tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a comment and rate this from 1 to 10. Your feedback helps me create better guidance for you.